Away from matters sports, and indeed we are glad to have that Shuja is now going to be participating in the Elite Rugby series there after a one-year hiatus. We'll be looking forward to that. Now let's shift gears and focus on matters of traditional medicine. If you've been brought up in an African setup, well, you've had miti shamba, traditional medicine and such. But then the question is, what is the role of traditional medicine in modern society, if any? And tonight we're going to be looking at supply chain challenges in light of uptick when it comes to matters of health living. To take us through this conversation is none other than Harriet, who is the founder of Harriet Botanicals. Thank you, ma'am, for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, big question is, does traditional medicine have a role in a modern society?
Well, yes, traditional medicine has a very big role to play in modern society. If you look at different traditional medicine from other parts of the world, including the Ayurvedic tradition or the Chinese medicine, that is very complementary to all the so-called modern medicine, allopathic medicine that is offered. Mm-hmm. Now, the World Health Organization has documented at least 200 bioactive components that come from plants that are used in modern allopathic medicine. So what then tends to happen is when people want something that is natural, 100% organic, and with minimal processing, they will lean towards traditional or herbal medicine from their own cultures. In this context, African traditional medicine.
So indeed, then there's a role to play, and we saw an uptick. Let's look at the uptick. Looking at the reports that have been shared by various medical facilities as well as the Ministry of Health itself, during COVID-19, there's an uptick of traditional medicine. Everyone was trying to deal with the pandemic. Now that we weathered the storm, we are seemingly okay, we are all right. Has it gone down, or are we still, using traditional medicine?
Indeed, COVID was a very interesting time for practitioners like myself. That is actually the time that my company grew the most that year. And since then, it's been tremendous growth year on year on. And what happened during COVID was that people were scared. And it was the first time facing a pandemic, especially on the continent, that nobody knew anything about. And they were predicting so many deaths. Now, what we tend to see is that when people are very anxious and scared, normally when things are not working very well for you, you tend to go back to source. You tend to go back home. People started now relying on natural remedies a lot more. And we saw Kenyans wanting to live a cleaner life, a healthier life. We saw Kenyans reaching for detoxification methods, natural. So this was the time they thought, well, if they've developed new protocols for COVID, for instance, what are the side effects? And these are some of the questions that were not answered at the particular time. From then on, once you have any supplement or medicine in the public domain, whether herbal or traditional or allopathic, that has been seen to work, since then there's been growth on growth on growth. For the use.
But then the question of safety, that's another thing, because if you're looking at the COVID time, I think among the fruits, so to speak, that people were actually taking or abusing in the lemons.
Absolutely.
Then we had the ginger, then the citrus, let's say. People were taking it in amounts that were not measured and such. So issues of safety when it comes to herbal or traditional medicine. We do it kienyeji, I'm using that word, with no guidelines. How then does it affect the growth trajectory for traditional medicine?
So at Harriet's Botanicals, we work with the University of Nairobi Pharmacology and Pharmacognosy Department. This was after we were overwhelmed with the demand. So we went to the authorities to find out how can we play a bigger role in providing this complementary medicine and do it in a way that is safe and legal. And so we worked with different bodies, different organizations, different government bodies that showed us the process by which you ensure that what you are giving the public is safe. We then went on to do manufacturing. So what we have done is we've taken the same ancient formulas, but we manufacture here in Nairobi and distribute in retail outlets in a form that can be traced and tracked. So that way it is easy for a customer who's out there to come back and say, well, I bought this from you, and I want to return it, and we are able to look at our processes, our quality. So we have modernized traditional medicine.
So we have modernized. So as a player within the value chain, because we are looking at, you know, other than that particular space, you know, the traditional medicine space, you know, what needs to be done to ensure safety, consumer safety, and also traceability, as you've said, of this particular items, or rather complementary medicine, as you've termed it. But then let's look at matters of supply chain challenges. There's the issue of climate change. We're all talking about it. We're talking about hubs. So climate change is also affecting that. So how then, as a player, do you think we need to, you know, lock up, or rather ensure sustainable supply chain?
Yes, what people did not know, what we are now learning, is that traditional medicine practitioners, especially in the forest, play a very big role in preservation of trees, because this is really their source of livelihood. They need to preserve the trees and the roots and the barks for other generations as well. This is traditional knowledge being passed on along families. And if you look at the Ogiek, for instance, who live in the forest but do not practice cultivation, and their role is to do beekeeping and to identify the important trees and to make sure that nobody's cutting them. So when you look at the people who actually take from the forest, traditional medicine practitioners are actually very low on that chain. They take very little, and they take from the tree in a way that it can be regenerated. So they are best placed at grassroots level to be part of, you know, like sustainable cultivation, planting more trees, looking after them, and also creating this knowledge base that will be a huge revenue for Africans. Other continents have actually taken advantage of the traditional knowledge that they have and commercialized it. And this is an opportunity for us as well. As we preserve the forest, we then create a new revenue source for all players, whether those at the grassroots, planting, and those in retail who are actually selling to customers.
Commercializing what we have learned, or rather passed on from grandfather to father and to son.
Absolutely.
And I like that you've mentioned the Ogiek. They're actually custodians of the forest as per their history there. And, you know, marginalized as they are, and they're still fighting to continue occupying the forest that they occupy. But then, as you talk about tree planting, you've mentioned that government has quite an ambitious program to plant quite the number of trees. But the question is, are we planting the right trees for the right place? And are we planting purposefully for medicine? What is the role that, you know, practitioners like yourself are playing in this particular initiative?
I think it is an incredible initiative that the government has actually taken on board to plant these billions of trees. And that has sort of given a stamp of authority for what practitioners have been doing for a very long time. Practitioners know the indigenous trees very well. They know how they grow, where they grow. They know what is the most important part of that tree. And they also know how to rejuvenate or regenerate the tree. Children then can get to know more from these practitioners. Entire communities like the Ogiek, as I mentioned, and the Maasai, who also play a very big role in cultivation and preservation of traditional medicine, can then be brought on board at grassroots level. Since this is something that will bring them direct revenue, the traditional trees also are in the traditional names, and this connects them very much to their culture and their communities. And it has an all-round positive effect. So they can play a very big role in disseminating the information, and even like identifying which trees to be planted, and also keeping watch on that tree. You might plant a tree, but what's very important is that you nurture it and allow it to grow. And this role can definitely be played by forest dwellers like the Ogiek, and the ones on the fringes of the Mau like the Maasai and the Kipsigis.
Now, you've mentioned something earlier, and I want to take it back to the issue of information sharing when it comes to matters of data and research. You see, you're practitioners, but how forthcoming are you with the information or the research that you actually go on ground? This cures this cures that. Because then that brings in the issue of intellectual property rights. How do you balance the two with the need of, you know, gaining more traction when it comes to matters of traditional medicine, especially now that you've gone commercial?
So it's very important for us when we're working with the community and with practitioners to also safeguard their knowledge, because this is something that they've had for thousands of years, and they know that this is community knowledge. They don't want it out there being misused. In the culture, only certain members of the society are allowed to practice, and only certain members of the society are allowed to harvest, which limits any damage to the ecosystem or to forests. Now, at Harriet's Botanicals, what we have done in what we're calling the modernization process, we've involved people like the University of Nairobi, the University of Kenyatta, and other groups, whether it's KEFIS, whether it's KEMRI. Even now, we have patented some of our formulas, but ensured that these are our own formulas that we have developed with
other researchers who are in this particular value chain for safety and also for documentation. Government has been looking at issues of having seed banks across the country in light of the GMO debate, you know, indigenous seeds and such. Is it something that, you know, when you talk about traditional medicine, is this something that we can also adopt, I mean, within the value chain? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can keep the seeds of these very important trees, some of them which are endangered, like Prunus africana, or one called Wabugia ugandensis. We can keep these seeds and also propagate them and then make them available to other people who are interested. I mean, I dream of a time when every single Kenyan will want to plant indigenous trees and indigenous medicine in their garden, even in the cities. But that, as we come to a close, Harriet, dangers of self-medication. Absolutely. Well, dangers of self-medication, so it's very important on traditional medicine. You know, it usually comes out when you're talking about prescribed medicine, over-the-counter drugs that we buy. But you never seemingly hear about, you know, self-medication being harmful when it comes to matters of traditional medicine.
Okay, I think the reason people have this idea is because most of the time the medicine is 100% natural and it's unprocessed. So in a sense, it's like, you know, can you really eat too much sukuma wiki? Or if you drink too much ginger and dawa, what will happen to you? You will just sort of excrete it out. But I think it is very important for us to regulate the sector and bring on all the players, especially those who are being recognized in their communities for having impact. Introducing a training regime and a regulatory regime that is friendly for practitioners, but at the same time bridges that gap between them and government and them and the medical community. I feel everybody should be involved. Traditional medicine, and I really want to emphasize this, is complementary to other forms of medicine, even allopathic medicine, particularly allopathic medicine. And if you look at our bottles, if you look at whenever we have our packaging, we always say, consult your doctor.
So it is complementary.
It is complementary. Okay. It is not an alternative. There are some people who will never take allopathic medication. There are some who will never take so-called complementary medication. I really believe there's a healthy balance in between. Talking to all the different practitioners. If you have a very mild cold, you can stay home and, let's say, take some ginger lemon. Or you can walk to your pharmacy and get some paracetamol over the counter. Or you can go to hospital and get something that has been prescribed by your doctor. All three are relevant and all three are useful.
Indeed. And we end it at that point. We're looking at the role that traditional medicine is currently playing in modern society. And we've been speaking to none other than Harriet Ngoko, who is the founder of Harriet Botanicals. And in her take is that all this is complementary. At the end of the day, you and I, the greatest wealth that you have is your health. That puts a cap on Matters Sunday Express tonight. Be sure to keep watching. Check out our website, that is www.kbc.co.ke for further details, especially information in those who are seeking help, and also just to do a follow-up on our specific period pieces, especially that one, Innocence Behind Bars by Leila Sodiq. I'm Regina Manyara. You've been watching Sunday Express, and my colleague on sign language has been none other than Byron Abuli. Have a great week ahead.